professors from Wall Street High School, and this section is on factoring out the greatest common factor. Our first example, you want to look at these numbers, 40, negative 30k plus 90k squared. What you want to do when you're factoring out the greatest common factor is look at all of these numbers, okay, and figure out which one within, or what number within all of these is a factor, okay? Look at 40, 30, and 90. And you recognize that you can take a 10 out of all of those numbers. So you factor out a 10, all right? Then inside there, you notice that if you take a 10 out of 40, you get 4. Then minus, you take a 10 out of 30k and you get minus 3k. You take a 10 out of 90k squared and you're left with 9k squared. So it looks like you're kind of doing an undistributing of this 10, which is what you are doing when you factor out a 10 out of all of these numbers. And that's your final answer by factoring out the greatest common term. Let's try another one. We've got 28p to the 6th minus 36p cubed plus 16p squared minus 40p. Now, when I look at this, I notice that every single term has a p in it. Okay, so you know you can take a p out. Now, let's look at the numbers. You've got 28, 36, 16, and 40. And you recognize that you can take a 4 out of all of those numbers. So really, we can take a factor of 4p out of everything. Now let's see what we have left over. If you take a 4p out of 28p to the 6th, you're going to be left with 7p. You took 1p out, so now you're left with 5 because you started with 6. Then minus. You have 36p cubed, you take a 4p out, you're left with 9p, and then you don't have 3 anymore, instead you have 2. Then if you take a 4p out of 16p squared, we're left with a positive 4, and you just have p to the first left over. You can put that 1 there, or you don't need it. It's up to you. Now we have negative 40p, and we take 4p out, so we're just left with negative 10. You don't have a p there because you took that whole entire one out. And now if you look at your numbers again, 7p to the 5th, 9p squared, 4p, and 10. None of them have another common factor, so this is my final answer. Let's try another one. Now we've got negative 40y squared x squared plus 10y cubed minus 90y squared. Now let's look at all those numbers and see what we can take out. All right, so looking at just the numbers first, we have 40, 10, and 90. So you can take a 10 out of all of those. Then we have, let's look at our first variable. We have y squared, y cubed, y squared. You want to take that least amount that you see in each. So y squared, y cubed, y squared, that means I can take a y squared out. Then my other variable is x squared, which is only found in the first term. So that means that it's not part of our greatest common factor. So we can take out a 10y squared. If we take 10y squared out of negative 40y squared x squared, we are left with negative 4, no more y squared, and just x squared. Then if we take a 10y squared out of 10y cubed, our 10 all the way comes out. So you could put a placeholder of a 1 there. And then we took out y squared and we had y cubed, so that means we have y to the first left over. Now you do not need these 1s here, but if you put them there, that's perfectly fine. Lastly, we have 90y squared. So if you take 10y squared out of negative 90y squared, we're left with negative 9 and no more y's. So this is my final answer. 10y squared minus, or times negative 4x squared plus, you could just have y minus 9. All right, and our last one, let's go ahead and look at this. It looks like it's really overwhelming because we have a lot of numbers. We also have a lot of variables, but let's look at these numbers. We have negative 28x to the 4th yz cubed minus 24x squared yz squared plus 32xyz squared. That's a mouthful. Let's take it step by step. Let's look at our numbers first. We've got negative 28, negative 24, and 32. The number that can be taken out of all of those that is the greatest factor is 4. So you want to take a 4 out. Now let's look at our x's. We have x to the 4th, x squared, and x. You want to take the least amount that you see in one of them, which is just this x right here. So x is also part of our least common factor. Now we have y, and y. So we can take a y out of all of those. Then finally we have z cubed, z squared, and z squared. So you take the lesser of the three and you have a z squared that you can take out. Now let's go through and factor that out. So if you take a 4 out of negative 28, you're left with negative 7. If you take an x out of x to the 4th, you're left with x cubed. You take a y out of y, you don't have anything left. A z squared out of z cubed, you're left with just z to the 1st. Now let's try the next term, minus. You take a 4 out of negative 24, you get 6. You take an x out of x squared, you're just left with x to the 1st. You take a y out of y, you're left with just 1, nothing. You take a z squared out of z squared, you're left with nothing. So all you have is negative x to the 1st. Then plus, let's do the last one. You take a 4 out of 32, you're left with 8. You take an x out of x, you're left with nothing. Take a y out of y, you're left with nothing. A z squared out of z squared, you're left with nothing. So all it is 8 at the end. So our final answer is 4xyz squared times the quantity of negative 7x cubed z minus 6x plus 8. And you look at everything that's inside these parentheses, can't take anything else out, so that means we got our least common factor on the first try. All right, so if you have any questions, please stop in the math office or come and see me or email me at kesterse@walshjesuit.org. I'll see you in class.